covered flex properties, we've covered selectors, we've covered nesting, covered background properties, border and all. We looked at them in depth. Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is GENIX-JS, a YouTube channel dedicated to teaching you all you need to know to get started with front-end web development. In our last video, we were building this contact form where we built the basic structure and the basic styling and also the basic grouping of the elements. So in this video, we're going to be continuing from where we stopped by actually making it look exactly the way it is and giving it some layout properties and some cool colors. So we're going to be talking more about Flexbox and some other display properties in this video as well. So stay tuned as we continue. So now looking at what we have here, you can see that we stopped at just the basic structure and giving it just the basic button color, grouping the elements together. So we've done about 90% of the HTML. So remain about just 10%, but this 10% is actually the basics, the main CSS of the whole web page. So now for us to get started with this, we're going to start from the root itself. So if you look at it very well, this is in the middle, this is in the middle, this is a card. So we're going to be creating this card first. So in order for us to create a card in HTML, we select the particular element where it is wrapped in. Everything is wrapped inside the wrapper, right? But it's not the wrapper I want to select, because the wrapper is like the background that contains this light green color. We actually want to wrap up the main. So the main is the card, right? You can just put a comment there, an HTML comment there, the card. So the main is the card. This is what the form and where the form and the heading is in. So in order for us to create this card, we have main, right? So we give it an ID instead of a class, rather, since the only main we have. So on the top level after the wrapper, so we're just going to continue. We create a main, card, main, an ID. So now this main, the background color is going to be white, according to how it looks here, white. And then we save. You can see that it's now white, but then white in the green background, right? So this is not what we want, and it doesn't look close to what we want. But in order for us to make it look close to what we want, like this, we have to space it away from the green background. So in order for us to do that, the wrapper is actually going to have a property called flex, and flex basically allows us to lay out our elements automatically. And flex has this special property, this special three properties that we use to center an element, to center a div, to center any element. So we have display flex and then justify contents. So basically display flex gives it that flex display. It gives it that flex display to treat it like a box. It treats this particular element that we are, the content of the wrapper, it treats the content of the wrapper like a box. So we can actually move it to the left, move it to the right, move it up, move it down, just play around with it. But then this display flex has a flex direction by default, according to the last video, of row. So we don't need to put row, because by default it's already row. Is when you want to change the colon that you put colon, right? So now you already have that. So we have different flex properties, but the one we'll be using here is center. So basically center, you can see now center puts this in the center for us. So let me explain to you. When our flex direction, so let's just get this straight. When if our flex direction is row, then our justify content will be operating horizontally, right? To be operating horizontally according to the row. But if it is colon, our justify content will be operating vertically, right? So that's what the flex is. So since it's row, let's test it out. There's another property called flex end. So flex end will move it to the end of the screen, so it's just operating horizontally. So flex starts is another one to move it to the start, but we want it in the middle, so that's why I give it center. We also have different ones like space around, space between, but these ones are for when we have different elements like 1, 2, 3 and want to space them around. And then we have space evenly for even spacing, space between, space around. You know, they are not really different from each other, but they have their differences as well. So now we want it to look like this. We want it to look like this in the middle. So we have another property known as align items, and we can give this one center as well. So now you can see that it has actually done what we wanted. But let me explain. So when your flex direction is row, your justify content operates horizontally, your align item operates vertically. Why did I say this? So let's just put a comment. When flex direction is row, justify content is horizontal, and align items is vertical, right? Can space and say when flex direction is colon, justify content is vertical. But this is not really common. It's usually horizontal, and align items is horizontal. So we're just going to focus on what we really need in this video. I said I was going to make a video dedicated to teaching you about Flexbox. So this is just what you need to know from now regarding this particular project we're building. So now that we've created this, so if we play around with this, you know, when the flex is colon, when the flex is row, and the flex direction is row here, the align item is vertical. So you can see it is going to be moving. If we put flex start, it will move up. If we put flex end, it will move down. So just like that, we have center, right? So that's that about that. So now the next thing we're going to be doing is, you can see that in this place we have padding. We have padding between the border and the content. So the same thing we're going to be doing here, we're going to be adding a little bit of padding, so we can give it a nice spacing. So we'll say padding and then give it like 20 pixels all round. So this padding simply means all round. You can give padding to padding bottom, but this is all round for top, right, bottom and left. So if we save this, okay, oh sorry, this is not meant to be here, this is meant to be on the main, right? It's meant to be on the main. So because the wrapper already has the background color that is the one wrapping the whole content, so we'll give it padding all round, so 20 pixels. So instead of you having to type, see that it's giving us that nice padding around it, so that makes it look so real, like how this one looks. So that's about that. So you can see that this has a padding of 20. We don't have to be saying padding right, padding top. We just want everything to be 20. That's why we did it that way. So now the next thing for us to do is, now you can see there's some rounded corners. If you look at it very well, you can see around here you have some rounded corners. So that's what we call this border radius. So it gives us this kind of curve around our cards or around our elements, mostly used on buttons, images and cards like this. So in order for us to add it, we just say border radius. So we're not going to give pixels, but we use percentage. So 100% simply means it is fully curved, and 50% means it is halfly curved. So we're just going to give it 20%, right? And if you look at it, you can see that it's not really looking how we want. Well, let's just give it 5%, right? Yeah, so we have what we want here. So if you give 100%, it's going to look like a circle. See that it's not really good. It's not what we want. But this is used to create, like, you know, all those designs, all those designs on websites. You just create a div and then put some border radius around it. So we just give it what did we give it the last time? 10, right? 10% here, or 5% here. So this is okay. It looks more like the original design, right? It looks more like the original design, right? So we're getting somewhere. So looking at our web page very well, we have some spacing between here. So instead of us doing margin everywhere, Flex provides us with a special property. Well, it's not Flex property, but then it works with Flex and Grid. Well, we'll focus on Flex. It's called the gap property. So the gap gives we have gap. Gap is grouped into two. We have row gap and we have column gap. Well, since we're dealing with columns, we're giving it column gap, right? Column gap can give it 20 pixels. And then I've not saved yet, but then when I save, you see the difference. Okay, row gap 20 pixels. All right, something funny. Okay, it's actually meant to be inside the contact form, right? Not inside the main, because the main is just between these two, right? Just between these two, but we want it to be between this element. Or we're already giving this one margin, so we don't need to now give it gap again. Okay, so I'm just going to cut this. Sorry about that. Control X, and then come into the contact form, right? And then you see that it has given us the proper display that we want. So this is looking a lot like what we have here, except the colors and you know how the font looks. So it's looking a lot like what we have here, right? So now this is meant to be before the header, because the header is inside the form. So I just Control X on that and Control V. So that's just it. So we have our contact us, right? So now looking at this, the contact us is a little bit smaller, so we can reduce the font size. So in our last video on minutes, we spoke about M's and Rems having font size of 1 rem equals to 16 pixels. So by default, this is what it is. So by default, basically our h1 is actually 1 rem of this 16 pixels. What do I mean? It simply means the h1 is the original size. It's 16 pixels times how h1 is meant to be sized. So we're going to be changing that. We're going to be reducing it, but we're not going to be using m's. We're going to be using pixels. Why? Because pixels just directly manipulate it. We don't have business with how the parent looks. We don't have the business with how the font size of the parent is. We just want to change the size directly. So give it like 15 pixels, right? See that it has reduced, and then you can increase it like 20. Yeah, it's more ideal that way. It looks more like the design. It looks more like the original design. You see, contact us, right? Contact us, first name. So you see that just by changing a few things, just by adding row, flex, and all these things, you see that everything has now taken shape. It's not looking so shabby like how it looked before. It's not looking so basic like how it was looking before, even if it looks basic now. But then we're just adding a little bit more things. So now, looking at it very well now, let's now continue. So going back to our design, so I'm just going to put the design here, so it's easy for us to just easily navigate around and zoom this out. So now the design, now you can see a little space between the label and the input. So for us to do this, we actually have to pick the group of each of those inputs. So what do I mean? Remember, we already gave them a basic we gave them the basic style like this input group, right? Input group, and this input group in our HTML, input group for this and for the email as well, for this also. So right, it's to style everything at once. Okay, so this is flex direction, it's colon. So basically by default the row actually is referring to the colon, because colon changes the whole this thing according to what we said here. When it is colon, justify content is vertical. So the colon gap is row gap when it is colon, and the row gap is colon gap. So let's just put that in there. When flex direction is colon, the colon gap is the row gap, and the row gap becomes the column gap. All right, so that's fine, that's that. So you can just say it becomes the row gap. All right, so that's it. So we reduce it to 10 pixels. Let's give it 5 pixels. So yeah, that's fine. And now for all the labels, we want to reduce the size of all the labels. We want to reduce how each of those labels look, right? Remember, we eat this legend, remember, but we still have this legend showing. We still have this one showing, right? So we're going to be styling the label, all the labels and the legends together, because they'll be having the same font size. And the reason why we're doing that is because this, let's zoom in, this is a label, this is a label, this is a label, this is a legend, but we want the same font size for each of them. So in order for us to do that, before our legend styles, we can say label we can say generic, yeah, general label and legend styles. So this is where I'm grouping my CSS to make it a little more maintainable, because you know, okay, this is for this is for that, and then you just edit the styles. It's not clustered like that. So since we already have a class named label, we just select everything, and then we already have a class named legend. We select everything, right? So we can give it a font size. Want to reduce the font size, so give it like 15 pixels, right? So let's give it 10 pixels. So the label and the legend have reduced to 10 pixels, but then we have a problem. This one did not reduce. Why did this one not reduce? Because we did not give it a class of label, and we're not also giving it a class of input. All right, so that's about that. But then this two also reduced, and that we don't want that to happen. We don't want that to happen. We want them to be big. We want them to be okay. We want them to be the same size. We want them to be bigger. So because they are labels as well, that's why they reduced. But because they are labels, we're going to be changing. Yeah, we're going to be changing the class. You can either change the class or access them using their parents. So we're not going to change the class. We're going to access them using their parents, right? So what do I mean? Stay with me. We don't want this to be the same size with this, because this is a label, this is a legend, this is a label, this is a label. That's why everything is having the same size, but we want this to be bigger than this. So we're going to change, we're going to access this using the parent, and inside here we know that the parent is radio group. So under here we can see this radio group, right? So we can put radio group styles. Okay, we already have it on top here, right? But let's still put a radio group styles, and then we have impute group styles. All right, so in order for us to select, there's what we call descendant selectors. So descendant selector simply means you're selecting an element inside a parent. You're using a parent to select an element, and we want to select this label and increase the font size. We want to select this label and increase the font size, and our parent has a class of radio group. So that's why I'm putting it under here. So you can say radio group, and then descendant selector, we have radio group. So this is a direct child selector, right? Or radio group, or radio group dots, not dots, radio group, and then you have label. So let's see if it increases. Font size, let's see, 20 pixels. So you can see that it's increased. So basically that's our element, that's our descendant selector. So descendant selector is direct child selector. Direct child selector directly selects the next element sibling, not the next element sibling, rather the next child element that's in. Okay, sorry, let's cancel this and bring this back here. So this selects the direct child. So what if we wanted to select something that was not direct? What are we now going to use? That's when we use the descendant. So because this is direct here, it's directly next to it, we're going to use the descendants, right? So I'm using the descendants, not the direct, but then the direct is more suitable, but just so you can know the difference. So let's just use the both descendants. So this direct selector, and then radio group, and then descendants. So you see that it's not different, it's the same thing. See that this descendant selects the element that is after this, but this one select the element that is directly after this class. That's why this is nearer and this is farther. So let's reduce it. It's too big. 10 pixels, 15 pixels should be enough. Yeah, that's enough. That looks more like the design itself. You can see it's a little bigger. Or how about 12 pixels? Let's give it 12 pixels. So 12 pixels. All right, so that's fine. So now inside our radio group, the radio button comes before the text, comes before the label. Looking at the design here, the radio button comes before the label, and it is a little bit spaced. So you know that this is actually also used. They used Flex to do this, or they just probably grouped it differently, but we're not going to be grouping it. To make our lives easier, we're just going to move this before, Ctrl X, put it before here. So we're not going to be adding flex property for this little thing. We're just going to add some margin to it, and that should be that about it. So we have it like this. So that's how it looks now. You see, it looks more like the design. It looks more like the design now. So the next thing that we're now going to do now is to give it some little spacing, right? Some little spacing. So to select our radio button, we have inputs, right? So we want to deal only with the inputs inside the radio group. As we said, elements, let's put this as descendants selector, put this in brackets and put parents and then elements, sorry, parents and then element. That's the sender, parent elements, child element. So the sender does not need a comma like group. And then we have direct selector. So the two of them are both parents to children, but this one does not need a comma, and this one does not need a angular brackets like the last one. So parent elements, and then we have child elements, or it can be children as well, because you can select a class, a whole class, using the parents or the descendants. So that's the power of selectors, rather than just using these IDs, elements. So you can just mix them together. I'll also make a video also teaching this, going in depth into selectors, but this video is focused on just achieving this contact form, so you can understand and get styling your CSS. That's that about selectors. So these are two powerful selectors, the descender selector and the direct selector. We also have the grouping selector, which we did here, so we can just put it here. Can put two dashes and say group selector. So we have in brackets element 1 and then element 2. So the group selector is separated with commas. Descendants, no comma. You can select any element inside the parent, and then direct to select the element that is directly under the parent, like directly next to the parent, the one that is like immediately after. So now that's that about selectors. So the next thing we need to do now is to add the make this one to be spaced out, right? So looking at it now very well, we can see we want to make this spaced out. We have to come here to the query type, that's radio group, and if you look at it now, the radio group is actually meant to be let's see, okay, query radio group. So we can give it flex, display of flex, and it is going to spread out to this place. So you add flex to a parent that has more than 2 properties or more than 2 elements or 1 element. So now for us to do that, we can say query radio group. So let's just move this down. We'll say query radio group styles. So you can see how structured our CSS is. We have input and radio group styles. Okay, the query radio group is here, right? Is here. So now that they're having different styles, we already have the display of flex set to the query radio group. That's why we can even see it on top of each other like this, because this query radio group here is containing both the legend, which is this text, and the radio groups, which is these two. So display of flex makes them to appear over each other like this. Display of flex, query radio group. Okay, so the next thing, right, query radio group. Okay, all right, so sorry, it's not query radio group, it's actually the field set. So there's another selector called number selector. So this number selector selects a specific element. Like for example, you have 3 field sets. If you want to select the second one, you can use what we call number selector. So the how many field sets we have? We have 1, we have 2. So we're selecting the second field set, right? And the second field set is this. So in order for us to do this, we can just come here and say we've already given query radio group a style. So it's not actually query radio group, it's query field sets. Sorry about that. So query field sets, query type field set rather, query type field sets, right? So now this query type field set has a class of field set. We didn't give it an ID, so this is going to make us learn about this kind of selector. So we can say field set, right? Field set, and then we have what we call pseudo properties and pseudo classes. Pseudo properties and pseudo classes. So pseudo elements rather and pseudo classes. So pseudo classes are classes that change the state of a particular CSS HTML element. So that's classes that change the state. So we can have things like over, when you bring your cursor over this button, it changes the color. So that's a class, pseudo class. So it is not directly applied to the element, it's applied on events or on a specific or special event. So if we want to select this, so we can say it's a pseudo class nth child. So basically nth child basically means the what's the position of the field set we want to select. And if you look at it very well, stay with me, we have 1, we have 2, and then we have 3, but we want to select 2 for field set, so we're going to say 2. So in order for us to test this, let's put display of none. All right, let's save. Okay, this did not change. Okay, it did not change because it's not nth child but nth of type, and then we put 2. All right, so it has actually worked, but we don't want to hide it. Now let me differentiate between nth of type and nth child. So nth child simply means, let's say that we have field set, right? So we want to field set to actually need either a direct child or a descendant. So we're selecting the second descendant inside field set, right? But that's not what we want, because the field set itself is not a descendant, it is a parent itself. So it is nth of type that we're going to use. So that's the type of elements. So we have 3 field sets in our HTML. We want to select the second one, so that's nth of types. That's nth of the type of field set. That's second field set. That's what it means. So nth of type 2. We give it display of flex, and you can see, give it flex direction of colon, and then you can give it column gap, because this is what we're actually styling. In order for you to have column gap work, you need flex property. So give it column gap of 20 pixels. Because if you look at it very well, we have the query type and we have the radio group. Alright, so that didn't work out as well. So what are we gonna do now? We have query type and we have these radio buttons. Okay, since it's a legend, it is not directly applying the styles, because legends are on the top level of the whole field set. So we're just going to give it a simple, so just so you know, if you want to select the second element or any type of elements at any position, use nth of type. So we're going to be cancelling this, right? Field set styles, we just need the legend. So query type legend, we just give it a margin bottom just to space it a little. Alright, so query type legend styles. Alright, so now looking at it very well, it's an ID of query type legend. So right click and copy this, copy, and then we can come here and then put this, give it a margin bottom just to space it 10 pixels. Alright, no, that's too much, let's give it 5 pixels. Okay, that's fine, it's proportional to the rest of them and it looks more like the rest of them. So we can now come here and say query type group styles, because now I want it to come like this to this place that it is. So, and that's for this. So we can give it query radio group, so that's query radio group styles. So you can say ID query is the ID. Yes, query radio group is the ID, right? So we can just copy this again, that's Ctrl C, and then can paste here and then give it display of flex, and that should solve the trick. Give it a justify content of space between. Alright, so we'll just paste them in between each other, but that's not what it looks like here. I mean, this one is space to this place, this one is space to this place. So in order for us to get that, let's just remove this justify content. So I know it seems like I'm doing trial and error. The reason is because when you understand how CSS works, there are some things that might not work the way you expect them to work, probably because of another selector that has been set or another property that is affecting it. So there's no property affecting this, but CSS is cascading in nature. It's cascade, so it's a style before the other. So in order for us to actually get this, let's look at how this looks. So this is a radio group. This is a radio group. This is under radio group. We want it to be elongated to this place. So user does not give it it's not fully, this is not fully reaching the length, it's not fully reaching the end of the element. So that is for the input. So we can select the radio group input instead and then make it expand to the end. Alright, so now I want to actually get this one to expand to the screen, just like how it looks in the design. Just like how it looks in the design, consider they expand to the screen. So, but there's a property we know, there's a special thing called CSS nesting. So CSS nesting allows us to select elements that are directly under and also descendants of a particular parent element. So in CSS nesting, let's say you want to select this radio group. So you don't have to type query radio group, or you don't have to start doing this. So you can just do this. So you can select either any of the elements, every of the elements in here. So let's say display of none. So you can see that it has all disappeared because the radio group in here is, the radio groups are the ones directly under, they are the descendants of this particular selector. So this means the parent, and this means all the elements inside of it. But we don't need this for what we want to do here. So you can just comment this out, control and forward slash, or command and forward slash. So that's CSS nesting. It will be useful as we go on. So we want to, okay, let's save. It's back. So we want to put all this to the left end. So Flex can help us to achieve this. So Flex, remember, it gives us automatic display and it allows our elements to fit into the screen and respond according to the screen size. So we have display of Flex, and then now you can see that everything has already directly fitting. It's giving us that nice, layout, but we want it to expand to the screen. So Flex, we can give it a width of 100%. So 100% makes it take the full width of the parent, which is the field set itself. So we can say width 100% and then save, and you see that we've gotten what we want, right? So now our form is almost complete, but then there are a few tweaks that we need. We still need to style out this text area and then make this one aligned, and then give our button some little spacing, same to with our inputs and some borders. So let's go back to the inputs, right? So the first thing I'll be doing for all the inputs, in order for us to style on the inputs, so I'm going to say general label styles. Why are we styling all the inputs? We're styling all the inputs because the inputs have similar styles. You can see all of them are like the same border, the same padding, the same border color, everything is like the same thing. So to select all our inputs, all we just have to do is, you see why I already gave it a class of inputs. See, it makes us our work easier. When you need specific styling, that's when you can now start combining selectors, but then it makes our styling easier. So now you can see inputs, 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 inputs. So everything that has inputs is going to reflect this particular style. So let's give it a border of 1 pixel solid, not black, but this looks like gray. Let's look at it very well. As front-end developers, you must always achieve pixel perfect. This is not pixel perfect, but as we go on, achieve pixel perfect. So even this is green, this asterisk is green, so this looks like gray, so we're giving it gray, right? 1 pixel solid gray. If you look at it very well here, you can see it looks gray now. It looks grayish, it looks like the same thing. If you zoom in, it looks grayish, right? it looks great. So by default, we don't want outline on our element. So remember what I said about outline in the last video. Outline is like on event click or on selecting that input, the border, what highlights the border is known as the outline. Is like you're highlighting the border, you are making the border to come out. So basically outline is used for example, there's an error with the form, so it's for validation, which we'll be using JavaScript to do. So we don't need the outline for now. We can add that when we start writing our JavaScript. So put 0. So if I click here, you won't see any outline again. It's just this, but that way you can type in text in, right? So that's that about that. Just reload this to refresh everything. So now coming back to here, let's zoom out. Coming back to here, we want to add some border radius here. So you can see border radius. Let's put this before the outline, border radius, and you can see border radius and 10 pixels. It's not really looking like it, so give it 5 pixels. So you can tweak it as you want. It doesn't have to be so, it's not so much of a big deal. That's why most times front-end developers are provided with the design files, mostly in Figma format. This is how the border looks like. So it has given us that border. Let me just increase it a little, 4 pixels. So when you have the Figma file, you will be able to actually see the exact size, right? But we don't have Figma file, so we're just directly replicating. So we're trying our best to get the exact design. So now we've given it border radius of that. So now the next thing is to actually give it padding, because if you look at it very well, there's some spacing between the elements and the border and the content. So let's give it like padding all around. Okay, not all around, because if you type in the same space, it's not going to be the same space. So on the vertical, we're going to give a padding of, let's say, 4 pixels. On the horizontal, I'll give a padding of 2 pixels. So in order for us to do this, padding has different types of shorthands. Shorthands are like shortcuts to get exactly what you want. So if you say padding, you can either put 20 pixels, which will give it the general top, which will give it the general top, right, left, and bottom left. But we're going to be styling horizontal, vertical, and to do that, we have 20 pixels represents the first one, represents the horizontal, the second one represents the vertical, right? I said on the horizontal we're giving 2 pixels, while on the vertical we're giving it 4 pixels, right? So you can see we've gotten that padding. Let's increase it 5 pixels. That's on the horizontal. Consider it has increased 5 pixels. Let's decrease this, let's increase this. You see that it will increase also. You see that has increased for us as well. So but this is not what we want. Let's reduce it back to what we said we wanted it to be. So no, 4 pixels. Okay, 2 on the horizontal, but let's leave it 4 and 6. Yeah, 4 and 6. All right, that's fine. That looks more like it, so that everything is already making and turning out how it's supposed to be. So we want the same padding also for the radio button border, right? We want the same padding. So we're just going to copy this and then go to the radio group, right? And then paste it here, and then you can see that it's the same thing, right? We also want the same color. I know that you would have said we should group it. Well, we can't group it because they have some distinct styles different from each other, such as the flex, display of flex, and all those things. Well, it's not on our input, but it's on our radio. So we'll just copy what we need from here. So can get this, sorry, can get all this, and then can copy this. So you can replicate styles when you know that the both are having distinct styles or similar styles as well. You can also group them, but that would just be like you trying to redo what is already, like you can just copy what you need. You don't need to start replicating it again, like grouping them and then giving them separate. No, you can just do this, put them in where they are needed. So now we have the first name, last name, and we're almost done. But then before we actually say we are done with the styling, as you can see, the as you can see very well, it's a little bit spaced, right? It's spaced. We have space in between them, so that can be done using flex, because we already have flex between each of the group. Yeah, the query, let's start with the inputs, right? The inputs, this one, there's a spacing between these two. So in order for us to achieve that, let's look at the input. So the input is inside here, inputs group, and then we have input group input. So it's name input group that we're going to be giving display of. So we already have name input group and we have query radio group. You see, now we've grouped it together. Now this is when you can now group it together because they have the same styles. They don't have distinct styles. It's the same thing because this is the query group and this is the input group. Query radio group, name input group. Now we can just put column gap and row gap this time because it is horizontal. Let's give it 10 pixels. Sorry, it's column gap this time. Remember, when it is when the display flex direction is, I keep forgetting that, sorry, when the flex direction is column, then the row gap becomes column and the column gap becomes row. But when it is row, which is the case here, the column gap becomes row and the row gap becomes column. So that's just how it's the same thing with justify, align, like the note I put here up here. So these notes are useful. It just gives you the basic understanding of Flexbox, and mostly we did more of selectors and Flexbox in this whole stuff, but it's very important in when you are writing CSS. So now looking at this, right, this, if you look at our design here, you can see there's a little space and also a little padding here. So the padding will actually come from the input itself, right? It's come from the input itself. So, or rather no, it's come from here, the radio. See, and they have distinctive styles, right? So now it's the vertical padding here that we want to increase. So we're going to increase this to about 8 pixels and you see the change, right? See that it's increasing 8 pixels. Let's give it 10. Yeah, that's fine. It looks more like it now. It looks more like design now for the inputs. You see, it looks more like it's, even if it's a little bit much, but at least we can just increase the vertical as well. So for us to do that, that's the first one. For the shorthand, the first one. That's the first one for the shorthand. So let's give it about 8 pixels. Yeah. So we can do the same too for the top. Only that one won't increase the vertical because people will be typing in there and we don't want so much spacing. So this is how it should look. Yeah. So it's good like this. I mean, type your email, type your pick, select your radio input and all. So now let's move to the message box, right? So the message box is before the submit button. So coming to our index to select the message box. So coming to our index to select the message box, we have a field set. So we're not selecting the field set, but we're selecting the message legend directly, and we're selecting the ID also. So we can use CSS nesting in this case, right? We can actually use CSS nesting. I know it might be overkill, but then let's just apply CSS nesting for this. So out of all the field sets we have, you can see message box field set and its children styles, because we'll be using CSS nesting in this one. So now I want to select the third field set because that's the message box. We have 2, we have 1, 2, and then 3. Remember I said end of type, right? So this is field set and then end of type. That's which one they want to select. We want to select the third one, and inside this third one we're going to be nesting a lot. We're going to be doing some CSS nesting, some cool CSS nesting. So I'm going to say from this particular element, right? Let me just put a comment here, applying CSS nesting, right? All right, so now we're applying CSS nesting here. So we're going to say this field set is this particular field, right? I want to select the legend because legend is being used here. I want to select this. So we don't need to be doing Flexbox like the others, because since we're using CSS nesting, it's specific to this style, even if it's similar to the rest. So we've just associated this to this. This is alone to this, and so we finished this section. This one, we're now focused on this last ones here, right? Before we call it the end of the styling and then tweak some things to make it look exactly like design. So CSS nesting, we're going to select the parent, which is the field set, the third one, and then the legend, right? So That's it, the parents and then the legend. And if you look at this very well, you can see field set legend. Of the third one, field set legend. So we're going to be giving the margin bottom because now we want the spacing to be similar to this, just like how it looks in the design here. Just like how it looks in the design here. Look at it. It looks like this, but the spacing is not as much as the query type one, but it's the same thing as these input ones, right? It's the same as these ones. Look at it very well. Let me zoom in more. So you see, it's the same thing as this ones. It's the same as this ones. So let's go back. So I'm going to give a margin bottom of 10 pixels, and then if we save, you can see it has given us that margin bottom, right? So let's reduce it to 5 so it can be equal to the 5 pixels rather. So now that's okay. Actually, it looks good. It looks like this one's, but then this one is a little bit more than this. So now when you are styling text areas, you don't directly add CSS styles to them. You can change it with HTML and then modify it with CSS. What do I mean? So there are properties of text areas. So text area is basically is similar to input, but this one allows you to, like, for example, a chat app, you have something like where you can type text. So text area is used to type text, long text, not like this one that is in vertical. This one allows you to type both in vertical and horizontal manner, so you see the text embedded on each other. So the first property is the row, right? So how many rows do we want to have? So the rows basically is like pixels. So we have 1, 2, 3. So by default, I don't know how many rows. Text lines basically for control. For default, by default, we can just say 10. Let's see 10. You can see now the 10 has increased. The rows have increased 10. But then it's resizable, right? So that's the text way. We don't want it to be resizable. We want it to be a definite row. We want it to be like this. We want it to look like this, right? We want it to look something like this, so that when the users come, they cannot just easily change it. Because if you change it to affect the layout of the whole page, look at, it's going to affect the layout of the whole page. Look, we don't want that. We want it to be, we don't want it to be resizable. We want it to give it a definite size, something that looks so much like this, right? Same thing as this. So how can we achieve this, right? We can easily just say display of flex, but then I want us to use this columns and rows. So let's give 40. So we're getting close to it, right? We're getting close to 40. So let's give 50, right? And then you see that it's already the same thing. It's the same thing as this. It's the same thing as this. So let's zoom this out. Now, but then there's a problem because this one is not the same as this, right? Everything has to be equal, like how the design looks. Everything has to be equal, like how the design looks. We're going to fix that soon. So let's reduce the rows. So the rows is vertical mode and the columns horizontal in this case. So that's about that, right? So it looks synonymous to how the design grouping is. So that's it. So now let's now use CSS to change the resizable property. Let's use CSS to change the resizable property. So we have an idea of message, right? So we're going to copy in this message. Copy this message. So that's the ID, similar to this. So we can say this coming to ID of message, right? Since it's inside the field set, right? It's inside the field set, so we can just say resizable. There's a property named resize, and we can put none. And then we click on save. You see that little button. Let me undo this. You see that it's resizable, yeah. But if you click on resize none and then you reload, you see that you can't resize it anymore. This is what we want. This is how we want it to be. But before we now say that we finished, because we're not done yet, we can just remove the outline as we did, because we don't want it to select this outline. We don't want this black outline. Only when we are dealing with JavaScript and validation that we want it. So we've removed the outline. So if you select, you see that nothing is showing again, and then we want to add border radius. So you can give border radius like 5%, similar to the rest ones. 5 or 10%. It's giving us a funny shape that we don't need. Let's see why it's giving us that. Okay, it's giving us funny shape because we don't have padding around it, so it is affecting the element as well, it's affecting the content as well. So we need to give it like a spacing between the border and the content itself. So we're giving all round padding of 10 pixels. Remember, all round padding. So that's more good, that looks good. And then we can now give it the border radius of 5%. All right, that's fine. Or 2%. All right, that's good, looks good. Because if you zoom in, you can see it's not looking so much like how it is, but it's looking okay. Or let's give it pixels and see. All right, that's better. Pixels, okay, pixels is better. So that was just a little misconception. Pixels is better, makes it look small. So now next thing now is this checkbox, right? Just want to align it to look like this. And looking at the way it is here, this is actually a display of flex, right? This is a display of flex. So let's look for our checkbox group. So this is our checkbox group. You can select the class, but let's make it an ID since it's the only one. You can select the ID checkbox group and then add a display of flex, and that's all. And then some gap, because that's a column gap since it's display flex of row. So now you can see that's CSS nesting. You can put this ID checkbox group and then display flex, and then you see it makes it proportional, and then you can add some column gap. Remember, if it is flex direction row, column gap becomes row gap. If it's flex direction column, row gap becomes column gap. So that's why it's column gap, because it's flex direction row. So let's just give it 10 pixels. So that's all. Last thing now is the button. The button is the last thing, right? So now the button is looking very different from what we have here, because we've not given it the proper color and the proper way it should look. So in order for us to do that, we can just remove the outline first, right? We want to remove the outline so that when we click, we don't need to see any outline there, right? We don't want to see any outline there. And also this button looks cool. This one looks so like all this old gaming button. We don't want this. We want it to look like this. So the first thing you need to do, let me zoom in, is actually to remove the border around it, because there's a border here, and increase the padding of the button as well. So to do this, you can just say border 0, right? And then padding. Now the vertical padding can be 20 pixels. Oh, that's too big. Okay, let's give it 10 pixels. Let's look at this. You can see 20 pixels is okay. Yeah, we've gotten exactly how the button looks, except the color and the font width. So looking at this, the font width is bold, right? The font width is bold. So just give it a font width of bold. So I hope you understood most of these things, because this is better than me actually explaining CSS properties one by one without actually building a project. So just with this single project, we've used many CSS properties. So programming is all about you combining different techniques, different concepts that are very sequential in order together to build out some things and solve problems. So that's what we're doing here. So we've given it bold, and then last thing now is border radius, right? And we can give border radius of 4 pixels, same as everything. So that wraps up the CSS of this, except that we need to space this a little. So we can select the radio button. Let's select the radio button. So we have type selector as well. So in order for us to select the radio button, input type of radio. So these are how input selectors are. Input type of radio, right? And then that is it. So you can say input type of radio, input type of email, input type of text. So it's the radio alone that I want to deal with. So we want to space it away from here. See how we've applied different selectors just to style this whole thing. So you can say margin right, since it's spacing from one element to another. So you can see 10 pixels. All right, that gives us a good margin away from the radio button, right? All right, so it's a little bit too much. Let's give it 5 pixels. All right, that's fine. So, and let's fix this problem that we're having here. This one that we're having here, let's fix it. So let's see how we can do that. So let's go to the name input group. Let's give it width of 100% here. Okay, that doesn't fix it. So when you have problems, we're actually done the form. Let's compare just the colors and the fonts. So you can see, if you zoom in, you can see it looks, let's zoom out. You can see it looks very similar, except that we have too much border radius here. Let's quickly fix that. Let's quickly fix that. Let's quickly fix that. So that's in the main border radius of 5. So we're giving it 4 pixels. Let's see. Let's give it 10 pixels. Alright, so let's compare now. Alright, that's better. That's better. So now this is our form. Our one is brighter than this one. So I'll just be getting the colors of this design exactly so that we can actually make it look the same. And then there's one more thing. This is looking so shabby because this space is here. So one thing I do when I get problems in CSS is I just inspect my web page. So let me put this on full screen. This is the last thing we'll be doing in this video before we now get to the next one, where we'll be starting JavaScript, right? Yeah, I know you're excited, and I'm excited also to start to teach you programming and not just design, because you have to understand HTML and CSS before JavaScript. So that's the best way I can take you guys, because this project covers validation, design, and some advanced things that we just looked at in an overview. So now I just inspect, I right click and then click on inspect, and then I come to, let me just remove this. So now you can see everything that I've written in my HTML is appearing here. I talked about this in my very first video, building your first web page with HTML, which was uploaded last year. So now you can see this is it. I'll leave a link in the description to that video. So this is it. So now what I need to do is to inspect this and see what the problem is. So if I click here, I can actually use this to hover upon this place, and then I select it, and it brings out the styles down here. Right, it brings out the styles down here. So now that I have the styles down here, let's see what's wrong. So if I remove the display of flex, see that it gives us that basic thing. I can modify the properties here. Alright, so after much debugging, I was able to get the solution to this. So basically this is how it looks. So if I save here, it should return back to how it looked before. So basically I noticed that the input was having the input wasn't filling up the full space. So, and it's just for the main input group. According to our HTML here, we'll just want to select the input group inside the name input group, and not the one outside, not that the one inside here. So all you just have to do is still CSS nesting that I'm going to apply here. So I'm just going to do this name input group, and then inside name input group, okay, it's not CSS nesting since it's just the only element we want to select. So input group, right, because it's a direct selector, so every single input group is going to be selected, right? Not descendants, but direct, because direct will select everything also that has input group type. So I just give it a width of 100% to fill up that particular parent input group, right? And that fixes it. So thank you very much for staying till the end of this video. Leave a like and subscribe for the next coming one, which is the one I'm really excited about. We're going to be validating this form, because we've built the basic structure of it using just HTML and CSS, and we've covered flex properties, we've covered selectors, we've covered nesting, covered background properties, border, and all. We looked at them in depth. Thank you very much for staying tuned. This really helps me create more videos by you supporting me and helping those out there who want to get started with their web development journey but don't know how to. So see you in the next one. Thank you.